that you're here today. So Helene and I met through another group in Wright County, and I had the opportunity to view some of the artwork that Helene does. She's an artist and has a number of exhibits around the Ohio and or Iowa, sorry, and Minnesota, including, I believe, something in the Monticello Community Center. So she can talk a little bit about that when she's talking. But beautiful artwork. And she also works at, let me see if I get this right, the Hennepin County
Health and Human Services.
Thank you. I'm looking through my notes and I couldn't find it real quick. So, and then Matthew is a student in Monticello Schools, High School, and works at the Monty Arts, which I don't know what that is. Oh. So maybe you can share that later. And they're here today to talk about the lawsuit they brought against Buffalo schools that was discriminating against people who are transgender. So I'm going to let them take it away and talk about the lawsuit. But I do want to say to both of you, thank you so much for your work on this. I know it would have been easier to, in some ways, walk away from the battle and not engage. And I'm sure it was a long and big drain on your family. And so we so appreciate that you took this battle on and that you have made a difference for other students who are going to that school. So I appreciate the work that you've done on this. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Matthew and I didn't discuss who wants to start. Do you want me to start?
Can you start?
Yeah, I can start. So back in 2015, Matthew was just entering 6th grade and he was at the Buffalo Community Middle School. And we chose that school because his sister had gone to that school and she loved it and she thrived and she was entering the high school. And she had told Matthew that it was a wonderful place and, you'll really get supported there. And so he chose to go there too. So we live in Monticello. So I'm driving them to the Buffalo Hanover Montrose School District. And a couple weeks into the school year, Matthew came out as transgender. And he and I asked the school we didn't right away, but I think within like 6 months, we were asking the school to allow him to use the boys' restroom and locker room. And they said no. And we got letters from Matthew's psychologist and his primary care provider indicating that their failure to allow him to use the boys' bathroom was causing incredible depression, and he was suicidal. And so we wanted him to get better, and they still said no. And so I contacted Outfront Minnesota, and I worked with an attorney named Phil Durham, who's now at Justice Health, and he's wonderful. And we got the Department of Education to come out. And we all met, and I met with the superintendent and the principal, and it was a really, really awful, horrible meeting where the superintendent spent the entire time. We tried to sort of express why what they were doing was discrimination, and I'll explain why it's discrimination in a little bit. He just kept responding with, "Are you attorneys? Are you attorneys?" and just talked down to us the whole time. And the representative from the Department of Education was also a woman. So we left that, and then Matthew deteriorated really quickly after that. And I eventually pulled him out of school in the middle of 7th grade. I didn't have a place to put him. And that's part of the problem for families like ours is we are legally required to have our kids be in school. And if we're not, we can be charged with educational neglect of a child, even if that school is unsafe for them. So I illegally removed him from school, and I managed to find a private school that would take him, and I just put him in the school in Minneapolis, and now I'm driving him back and forth from Minneapolis every day. It wasn't a great fit, but he was at least safe there. And then I filed a Department of Human Rights complaint. That complaint took a couple of years to be completed. And they came back finding probable cause that the school had discriminated based on gender and sexual orientation, had created a hostile education environment, and had violated the Minnesota Human Rights Act. So the reason it's discrimination is because they're treating the kids differently. Basically, they're treating the trans kids as if they are diseases that everybody else has to be protected from. And you can imagine how that causes depression and other mental health issues. And so that's the basis of the lawsuit. There were other lawsuits at the time, especially Anoka Hennepin. And so was it just 3 months ago? Was it only 3 months ago? Our lawsuit was settled about 4 months after Anoka Hennepin's appeal was settled. When Anoka Hennepin's was settled, that set precedent for the entire state, and the judge was very clear that every school district in the state has to treat trans kids just like cisgender kids. And quickly after that, Buffalo finally agreed to settle. We went through conciliation with them, which failed miserably. And we were getting ready to go to court, and then they decided to settle. And so they had to, and they just recently passed a gender affirming policy. They have to do a bunch of other things as well. So the gender affirming policy makes sure that kids can use the bathroom that best meets their gender. They can use the locker room that best meets their gender. They cannot anymore prevent a middle school Gender and Sexuality Alliance Club, which they have at the high school, a GSA. And I can talk more about that if you want. They have to pay Matthew, which is good because he lost about 1.5 years of middle school education. And so he's got a little bit of makeup work to do. Gosh, what else do they have to do? They have to train all their licensed professionals, which they did do. They have to do that every other year for 7 years. They have to do a climate survey every year and post the results of that publicly. And that climate survey is supposed to talk about the well-being of the population, including transgender kids. And hopefully we will see their well-being go up as a result of this. Is there anything else they have to do? No?
Not that I can think of. I feel like there is.
I feel like I'm missing something.
I can't remember what it is.
So,
I had notes on it, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So that's what happened in a nutshell. So recently we went to the school board meetings because we wanted to see the resolution passed. At least I went. Matthew was on vacation, but me and his older sister went. I don't think it would have been a good idea for him to go. That was a horrible place to be. There was a lot of people spouting a lot of misinformation, and unfortunately the school board is not countering that misinformation with the facts. They're not explaining to the community what this gender affirming policy means. So I'd like to sort of go through that a little bit with you, what the misperceptions are, and then if you know what the actual case is, maybe you can help explain it to people. But basically one misperception is that that their kids are unsafe because boys are in the girls' bathroom, and that we're taking something away from their kids, and their kids will be uncomfortable and they will suffer as a result. What this policy actually does is treats all the kids the same. So the policy says that any kid, transgender, cisgender, any kid for any reason who wants a private space to go to the bathroom or change in the locker room can now have access to a private space. And that is a right that they did not have before. So this policy has afforded every student an entirely new right, okay? And I heard a lot of people saying about how they're gonna have to build expensive new bathrooms and we're gonna raise their taxes now and all this other stuff. It doesn't require an entirely new wing of locker rooms and bathrooms to do that. They can go out to Walmart and get themselves a $25 screen. That's privacy. They can put up curtains for a very limited amount of cost. So this doesn't have to be a very expensive thing. In fact, when we asked that they let Matthew use the locker room in the high school, I offered to go to Walmart and buy them a $25 green. Had they agreed to that at the time, all this would have cost them nothing and I'd have been out of $25, but this cost them a lot in the end. Another misconception is that on day one, any boy will be able to walk into the girls' locker room and look at girls just by saying they're transgender. And that's not how this works. If somebody wants to go into a bathroom that they are not previously, or a locker room that they would not previously be expected to be in only, they need to tell somebody. They need to tell a nurse or a counselor, a teacher, somebody, at which point a transition plan would be put in place. And that transition plan would ask them what pronouns do they want to use and what's their new name. And there would be an expectation that they express the new gender through their dress and behavior and so forth. So considering the amount of vitriol and hatred I heard at those school board meetings towards trans kids, and knowing what Matthew goes through on an hourly basis, just in the community as a whole, the likelihood to me that some cisgender boy is going to pretend to be transgender for their middle school or high school career just to peep at girls is really, really low. And in fact, it's pretty laughable to me. But that is one of the fears that is out in the community. What this policy gets them, however, we've had policies like this for about 10 years now. And so there's been enough time to do research on what the impact of policies like this are. And what we have found out is that in school districts that successfully implement gender affirming policies, the well-being of the trans kids, of course, goes up dramatically because they are safer and they are accepted for who they are and treated as human beings. The well-being of the LGBTQ kids, trans kids are about 2% of the population, and LGBTQ kids as a whole can be between 10 and 15%. At the school board meetings, I heard a lot of people talk about how 2% of the population is now dictating their lives and that's not okay. But if you add up the middle school and high school population and multiply it by 2%, that's 90 kids. That's 3 to 4 full classrooms full of kids. And I don't think that's an insignificant number, and they shouldn't be dismissed. When we add in the LGBTQ kids, that's about 400 to 500 kids. So the trans kids' well-being goes up considerably. The LGBTQ kids goes up another 10 points. They go up as well. The rest of the kids, their percentages of well-being went up as well by about 2 to 5%, depending on the school district. So the entire student body's well-being goes up when we successfully implement gender affirming policies. And the reason is everybody feels safer. Because it turns out not all kids are bullies. Not all kids are against LGBTQ kids or trans kids. They're good kids, but they witness bullying going on and they feel bad. They witness the bullying going on and then they worry for themselves about how are they expressing their own gender enough so that they don't end up being misconstrued as trans, and then they get the bullying. So they might be modifying their behavior, which they wouldn't normally do if they weren't afraid. They feel bad because they see other kids getting harmed and there's nothing they can do about it. So they feel hopeless and powerless. When we implement the gender affirming policies, that goes away and their well-being goes up. And you know what happens when the entire school body's well-being starts to go up? Academic outcomes go up. So the gender affirming policy, which is getting a huge amount of resistance and all sorts of bad things, actually gets them a new right to a private space that they didn't have before, the likelihood of increased well-being for all the kids, and eventually better educational outcomes. That's what they're fighting against. But that's what this lawsuit did, and that's what the gender affirming policy will do. Yeah, go ahead.
A couple questions. It seems like this policy would also be good for students who maybe have high anxiety or social anxiety and don't want to, want to have safe spaces where they can go. So it also seems like it has wider reaching, impact beyond that people aren't considering. That was my first question. And then the second one is, can you define cis? Because I know a lot of people don't understand that term.
Cisgendered is a person who identifies with their assigned gender at birth, and transgender is someone who doesn't identify with their assigned gender at birth.
Thank you.
And yeah, I can think of a million reasons when I was in middle school why I might have wanted a private space every once in a while. And that would have increased my well-being a lot. Anybody having social anxiety, having a private space during that time would be helpful for them. So yeah, this is a benefit that surpasses just gender equity. Yeah. We're hoping you have questions. I don't know if you want to hear about the resistance or not, or what it's been like for Matthew and the family.
Well, is Matthew, does he have a school now that he's going to, that he's feeling okay about?
Yeah, I've since freshman year, or like since 8th grade, I've been going to the Monticello School District. So I go to the Monticello High School, and I'm in my senior year there. And like, I haven't had any problems with I've been using the men's bathroom throughout my entire high school career, the men's locker rooms, men's everything. And I haven't had a problem with the teachers or even most students, or just like, I just go into a stall and no one
Yeah.
cares.
Well, I know I retired in 2016 from Monticello High School, and I know we had clubs for, all kinds, and everyone was welcome, and
Last year we had a GSA, but we had to end it because it kept on getting hijacked by bullies coming in, and we had to. We're probably gonna start it again this year, but like we have to figure out a way to like keep people who are there to cause us harm away. We still haven't figured that out yet.
So yeah, do you have a teacher that will be?
Yeah, and this last year, I think it was one of the culinary teachers. I don't know who it was this
It
year.
would be good. They would be good. Yes. Okay. Well, I was just wondering because I think that's amazing that Monticello was.
Yeah, Monticello was great.
Very progressive compared to Buffalo. I would think Buffalo would be.
Right. I mean, had I known that Monticello, well, number one, I didn't know he was trans until 2 weeks into 6th grade. But had I known that, I would have gone around and asked the schools, how they would have responded. And Monticello, the only thing I say about Monticello is that they have a case-by-case basis with their policy. And I have recommended to them that they have an overall policy, and that's for risk management purposes. That way everybody is guaranteed to be treated the same, although that's what the law says now. But as long as they have that policy and they're following that policy, then that protects them from lawsuits. So they had a case-by-case strategy when Matthew and I approached them. And the lawsuit was to protect Matthew from the adults. And we've never had to do that at Monticello. They've always treated him very well, the adults. Can't say all the kids are great, but yeah.
No, I still get harassed on the daily, but
Yeah.
at least I don't have any problems with the administration.
Well, that's good. I'm glad
Yeah,
to
the
hear that.
difference is when he gets harassed in Monticello, there are adults that will respond appropriately, and in Buffalo, that was not the case.
The adults respond swiftly and like they're on it right away, and it's very
I'm glad
nice.
to hear that.
The middle school, if you went to them for anything, they kind of wouldn't do anything.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions?
We have a comment, and I apologize. We're having to do this on a cell phone because we can't, for some reason, connect with our computer. One of the things that we noticed, in particular, the reportings from the school board meetings in Buffalo, I'm curious if anybody else caught the fact that it all seems like all these parents are worried about protecting their girls, but nobody says a word about a need to protect the male student population. I just find it really interesting that it's very one-sided.
I mean, at least when I was younger, their thing is the middle school part of their reason they didn't want me to go into the men's bathroom is because they wanted to protect me, and they were scared about me getting beat up by the boys. I think that's might be part of it. And obviously there's,
I also think that, what they're afraid of is that, again, a cisgender boy will go into the locker room and have access to girls. And getting rid of trans kids doesn't solve that problem. Because if you want to solve that problem, then we need to teach boys in general not to be predators, right?
Yeah, and then we have a patriarchal society where men say, well, I don't care how you feel, you got to be tough, you got to be strong, and we have to protect the little girls. Yeah, I think that's a throwback into.
Well, even the idea of protecting girls and protecting women in general has always been a classic sign of patriarchy, right? So they're not able to protect themselves, they're property of the men who have to be protected.
Exactly.
And so this just is part and parcel of this idea that women are somehow less than men, need to be protected. And and then it's just really interesting how you can see the intersection between gender rights in terms of women's rights and gender rights in terms of transgender rights, and how those really intersect and come together, and how we have these ideas around gender roles that are so entrenched in our communities. I always used to say to students, what's the first thing you ask when a child is born? Not their name. You ask if they're a girl or a boy. That's the very first thing you ask. That's so important in our culture. It just is overwhelming how important that is. And we need to move away from that a little bit and just let people be. I think it's really interesting that the younger generation seems to have a lot more gender fluidity. So if either of you want to talk a little bit about how the younger generation is seeing gender these days compared to like people of my generation, in my 50s, or people who were in their 60s, where gender was much more structured when we were young. Matthew, maybe you have some insights.
I think it's less so about perceptions of gender and more of acceptance of gender. And I think the younger generations are like, hey, this person's different, but that's okay. And in my experience, the older generation's like, hey, that person's different, that's not okay. I mean, gender fluidity has been around for centuries, and it will continue to be around. And so I think it is just about the culture, and I think the culture of the younger generations is a bit more progressive, or continuing to be more progressive, and that's probably why I think maybe the same amount of people are queer, but a lot more people are open about being queer.
Definitely that.
Yep.
I have a question for both of you, really. How can we support you and other kids and all kids? I mean, I'm just thinking, hey, I maybe need to call somebody in the Monticello school and say, hey, good job, thanks. But then also, what's the flip side? How do we get your message out? How do we support you and other kids that have needs that are not being addressed?
Do you mind if I go first, Matt?
I was waiting for you.
Okay. So one thing that would be super, super helpful is if businesses and places around here that are accepting of trans and LGBTQ kids just put up rainbow flags and trans flags in their windows and just made it clear that that's a safe place. There are very few that are willing to do that. When my daughter was at high school, she was the executive for the GSA, and she would go to the middle school and say, hey, could you just put up like this rainbow flag so kids know that this is a safe classroom? And the teachers would say, I'd really like to, but I think I'll get fired if I do that. So if you can't even just say this is a safe place, then the whole community feels really, really hostile. And quite frankly, this has been an incredibly hostile community. I don't know how much Matthew wants to say, but I mean, there are several people that outed him on Facebook. He's, as a result, like his anonymity is completely gone. And so we've just sort of accepted that we're the poster family for all of Wright County. And that's fine. I mean, but it put his safety at risk. We get harassing things. I've had to invest in a security system. we're Jewish as well, so we get all this anti-Semitism just sort of tinged in with it. That's like putting his face into swastikas and telling us Hitler was right. And
Yeah, there was.
yeah, I mean, it's really been outrageous. I'd like to see like the community, like the government, or, you know, I'm working with Hennepin County and we're going to pass a resolution for a gender affirming policy countywide. And that will mean that all of our vendors, all of our contractors countywide, and we have contractors in other states, like Hennepin County is huge, will have to abide by the gender affirming policy, like it or not. But having just that, you know, just knowing that in Hennepin County that we're protected in that way, I don't feel that in Wright County at all. You know, and I heard the comments you said about Wright County when we came on. I used to work for Dakota County too. I can tell you that Wright County is behind the times in many, many ways. And I've been, you know, a professional in government for well over 20 years. But yeah, if businesses and community members could just put up something that says this is a safe place and I accept trans people, that's in itself revolutionary, because we don't see that. We see a lot of everything else. And I'll turn it over to Matt.
I think you said everything I could have said. That's kind of exactly what I was thinking. So I don't really have any more to add.
I was wondering if your perspective on Buffalo. My niece is gay, and she, but for all appearances, she dresses and as a male, and she's married to another woman, and she's, you know, a manager of an accounting firm, and, you know, she's really quite successful. And she's never, I run around with her quite a bit. And we hardly ever have any issues. And she's, you know, she dresses in male clothes. She has a butch haircut, you know, and the whole thing. So, but when we go to Buffalo, it's really an issue. And this weekend we went to the Buffalo Target, and she was in the men's department looking for jeans. And she found some, and she went to the clerk to use the dressing room, the men's dressing room, of course. And I mean, you would guess that if you just glanced at her, you would think she was male, because she dresses, she has a butch haircut, you know, you just guess. But this clerk said, no, you'll have to use the female. You can't be in this area. And my niece is, well, let's just say she's not a wallflower. So she said to her, if you don't want me to deck you, you better get out of my way.
Good for her.
And then went into the dressing room. But I just, Buffalo just seems to be just, I don't know. It's just, I just
Wright
really
County.
have issues in
Wright
Buffalo.
County. It's not just.
Yeah,
Buffalo.
Wright County too, but
Yeah,
I
I was
mean-
gonna say, it's the south side of Wright County, Cokato, Howard Lake. They don't have any targets, but you're gonna have the same issues there.
Mhm.
It's pretty extreme, our exclusion of people
Mhm.
in this county.
I mean, I think we're okay in Monticello to a point. I do think Buffalo is extreme. We actually in our family refer to Buffalo as crazy town. So, and I do my best not to go there anymore.
yeah, I support that.
I don't know, Matt. Do you think Buffalo is worse than Monticello?
Buffalo is worse for school, because obviously, and Monticello is worse in just street harassment.
Hmm.
I think I get harassed a lot more in Monticello than I do in Buffalo, but that's probably because I spend more time in Monticello and I'm more out and about in Monticello.
Yeah.
So
One of the few times we've been able to get license plates and follow up on that harassment, turned out they lived in Buffalo.
Oh,
So,
Well, Matthew.
but yeah, we try to get
That's
license
funny.
plates and have law enforcement follow up. I want to point out something about the sheriff's department. Can I tell that story, Matt? Or do you want to?
I would like to tell a story
Go
because
ahead.
so I longboard a lot, or I go biking a lot around town in like just around where my house is. So near my house is a street called School Boulevard where the high school and elementary school is, and I'm on like um so I'm just longboarding down. I'm at a stop, waiting to cross the street. A guy, I can't remember if it was full or empty. It was most likely empty. Threw like a slushy thing at me, like an empty slushy thing you get from a gas station. And then a cop is like turning on the other direction, window open. The guy, okay, the guy who threw it at me yells a slur. I'm not going to say it, but you can guess what it is. Or what, I actually can't remember, but it's one of two. And the cop, I look at the cop like, are you going to do anything like this? And the cop has its window down, and he most likely heard what the person said, and the cop goes and drives off. Like when I was, and like the cop saw me get the slushy thrown at me. Like he 100% saw it.
So, you know, we don't expect the sheriff's department to protect Matt. I mean, we're all alone on that.
Yeah.
Not that we don't call them when things happen, but we don't have a whole lot of expectation that they'll be follow through. I mean, we don't even know if who we're calling and talking to when we report stuff isn't that cop who made eye contact with Matt and then decided to just drive away and not go after the other car. So.
It's not fun, but it is what it is.
I mean, I think the thing to take away from that is that on a regular basis, Matt wants to just be out in the community being safe, and he gets gender slurs and gay slurs and things thrown at him from cars, and it's a pretty common occurrence.
Like it happens once or twice every few months, which is more than it shouldn't happen at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not uncommon for it to happen. Especially like last year, I would get slurs yelled at me almost every single day when I would be like longboarding home after school.
Which is why, like, when I say it's a hostile community, it's a hostile community. I mean, that doesn't even include the private things people send to us. So
Yeah.
the only way to counter that is for us as a community to be vocal about how that's not okay. And, you know, we support and love trans people. I just don't know how to make that happen here. So. But the idea that, you know, they can hate away all of us. I mean, we've lived here 20 years. Matthew was born in Monticello. I worked really hard to give them a stable home, and because I'm a single mom, I mean, I worked really hard to give them a stable home. I didn't want us moving around and things like that. And we chose here, and it's just, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I think that's a great question of how do we stop the hate in Wright County? Because it seems like the hate has been building. And I was going to ask earlier if I know that I'm really happy to hear that Monticello schools, and it does seem that the teachers, there's a lot of teachers and administration that are really on board with the idea that there's a diverse population out there of all kinds of diversity and of students, and that they need to be supportive of all their students. So there does seem to be that level of acceptance inside of the staff and the teachers and the administration. But I know that Monticello schools have been really battling with this, just like all of the schools in many of our rural communities, battling with, you know, pushback against teaching about racism and, you know, from parents. And the parents seem to be in a really bad place in these communities. And then the ones who are supportive seem really silenced. And I'm not sure how we help parents who are silenced speak out more. But do you sense that things, you know, since like, I guess since 2016, when it seemed to become better or easier to hate and be okay with hating, do you see an increase in hate, or do you think that things haven't changed that much from your perspective?
Well, he came out in 2015, so it's hard to judge on the trans side, but I can tell you as a Jew that I received more swastikas and anti-Semitic messages in 2016 than I had in my entire life up to that point. So.
So it does seem like we're really, like Wright County is really embracing hate right now. And I'm not sure how we can end that. It just is so sad to see.
I think education is the only way.
What's that? I'm sorry, Matthew, I couldn't hear
The
you.
only way.
I think the problem is we're always preaching to the choir though, and I don't know how to get it out to, the people who actually need to hear and how to find a way to present that they'll listen. That's why I keep focusing on the positives of the gender affirming policy. Like these are serious actual benefits that they are getting from that policy. If I could get them to listen,
And even though we say we're preaching to the choir, I still feel like there should be more people here today. And I don't know if there was other meetings conflicting like the DFL meeting, but it does feel like even though we say we're preaching to the choir, that the choir has a long way to go too in their understanding of a lot of our issues.
I was going to ask kind of this topic, what's your understanding of where these non-educational groups like churches, various religions, whether they're, Catholic, Lutheran, whatever, other ones, to the community health clubs, where the parents get their kids involved. Some of those are kind of tight knit. You always think about the hockey families, they're so intertwined, they're almost related, Any groups like that you find are either worse or are more affirming?
I don't think I interact with groups like that enough to know. I don't.
The arts groups,
Yeah, I was assuming.
Yeah, the arts groups have been, I think, basically where we found most of our acceptance.
Yeah, the arts group has been great. They're awesome.
But that's just kind of hand in hand. They're a lot more accepting. They just are.
What about the churches?
I think more intelligent myself.
So in Buffalo, there's a group called the GSA Booster, and that is an affiliation of, I think, 7 churches. So actually, I have sat down and had lots of meetings and used to attend their meetings in Buffalo. And so I do think that there is some leadership collectively in those churches to get that out to their constituents. I don't know that it goes much beyond that, the core group of people who may have GLBTQ people in their own family. I don't know that anybody's preaching from the pulpit about that kind of acceptance.
Right.
Are you? Wonderful.
Only does. Only does.
We must, yeah.
That
Is
is
there-
wonderful to hear.
Is there not a group like that in Monticello then?
I don't know.
Okay, probably not.
Again, we're Jewish, so we don't, the only reason I know about that is because what they approached the GSA in Buffalo, which my daughter was the executive for at the time, to ask them what they could do to make things easier for LGBTQ kids in the school. And then they formed a collaborative. And they sort of back them up. So like if the GSA needs some money to do an event, they're there and they're like, here's some money. If that would be cool to do in Monticello and see if we could do that. Like Matthew said, the GSA sort of got shut down, but having a GSA booster might be able to help them to keep from getting shut down, because there really isn't a place for LGBTQ kids in Monticello to like safely be together.
Well, and from the best.
I was going to say Angela Bankston is in charge of the GSA booster, and I forget which church she's from, but I could forward somebody her information if you're interested.
Well, Angela's represents Zion Lutheran in that group, and we have been active in that, as well as Brian Hance from Buffalo Presbyterian. That unfortunately, even that student organization kind of went away with COVID.
Yeah.
And they've struggled to get their feet back under them again now. You know, the support group, and Helene, I think we met you at one or two of those meetings.
Possibly.
You know, the support group is there to a degree, but it's difficult. You know, and okay, I'm in a unique position as minister of a church that virtually everybody that is a member of our congregation, which isn't very big, is in support of that, and our entire denomination openly supports LGBTQ issues. You know, you guys have talked a little bit about acceptance in the Buffalo community. To be perfectly honest, from going back to August of 2017, when we started leasing our space downtown, we've had a rainbow flag flying in our window. Our logo is a rainbow flag. I'm going to stop my video and it doesn't show on here, sorry. But our logo is a rainbow cross. I honestly expected when we put that up on our windows that we would have some pushback from people, some vandalism and things like that. And surprisingly, that has not happened. I'm amazed that it hasn't, particularly over the course of the last year or so. But, you know, I certainly would offer my support. Matt, you talked about trying to get a GSA group going in the Monticello school. There is not a UCC church in Monticello. Not that there aren't others that would be supportive of that LGBTQ community, but I certainly would offer any assistance I can give to that group if you know, are looking for somebody from the outside to help support that.
I appreciate that.
I wonder if there, you know, you were talking, Helene, about spaces for LGBTQ kids to gather. Ole has a space, so that's something to consider. It's in the devil town of Buffalo, but.
And I apologize for not having seen that. I know the bookstore is very supportive, and I know of a few other places as well. And I don't mean to say that all of Buffalo is unsupportive, but I really do. They've scared me enough to stay away. When they had their rally this summer, Matthew was in Buffalo, and I drove over there, and I was like, "You need to get out of Buffalo." I mean,
we were supposed to. If I remember correctly, we were supposed to go to the beach that day, and Mom was like, "Nope."
No, I didn't want him walking around with all that going on.
And it was at the rally where our lovely sheriff got up and talked.
This was the Save the Flag one.
Okay.
I don't know if the sheriff spoke.
I just know he spoke at a rally, so.
Yeah, I read what his comments were. Yes.
Yeah. So I have a question that's a little broader. There's been some legal action in other states where rights are being taken away. How is what's happening as a nation in some other states? How do you see that impacting Minnesota? Do you fear for some rights being taken away in Minnesota? I know our wonderful majority leader, I think it's Kurt Doubt, isn't it, is going to run for governor, and yeah, that guy, yes. And so I worry about that, and you know, we're just a sliver away from being more conservative as a state as a whole. So thoughts on how the national pushback or backlash or whatever you want to call it, the hate mongering that's happening nationally, might impact Minnesota?
So one thing I learned going through this lawsuit is I'm less concerned now about who the governor is and really, really concerned about who the attorney general is. And so I will be doing all my efforts to ensure we have a Democratic attorney general. Yeah, that was really, really scary when we just barely made it, because without without Ellison as Attorney General, going on those lawsuits, we could have lost very easily. And, you know, I don't know that Matthew would be alive today if I mean, there would be no school that would have to treat him as who he is. And, you know, where are we supposed to let these kids get an education then? And yeah, I'm super, super concerned about what's going on in other states. I talk to families. We have what's called the Parents of Transgender Kids sort of Facebook group. So I talk to people from all over the country, and a lot of them are trying to move out of their state, you know. So now we have graphs up about, you know, which states have the best laws and what's the safest state right now, and what does that look like over the next 2 years. And people are moving, not because of climate change or because they found a better job, but because they want their kids to be safe. And the biggest legislation for me, that this was the scariest, was during the Trump administration. They tried to pass, and I think they're still trying to pass this every once in a while, and in some states, the right for medical professionals to opt out of giving care to anybody because of their strongly felt religious beliefs, which means if Matthew got shot at the middle school and they took him across the street to the hospital, they could let him die based on him being trans and them not liking it, and they wouldn't have broken the law. That would have been completely fine. And it meant that, you know, I literally would get on the phone before I would take him anywhere and be like, you know, what are your strongly felt religious beliefs about, you know, before I would could even take him to go get, like, do you have bronchitis? Do you have strep throat? You know, I needed to make sure that he wasn't going to be treated that way because, you know, quite frankly, at the time, things like that, he'd already been through so much trauma and abuse. I had to make sure that the medical professionals I was taking him to, if he needed care, weren't going to also misgender him or treat him poorly and things like that. So yeah, I'm very concerned about a lot of the legislation out there. It impacts my daily life, like in ways I think people don't consider.
I think another thing that we could each do too is ask our professionals in our life, how do you feel about this? And if they don't support, you know, people, you know, whether it's transgender or they have racist leanings or whatever, and just not use them anymore and take our business elsewhere. Something for us to consider. Because I mean, why is it just you that has to ask before you go to a doctor? Do you support people who are transgender? Why don't we all have to ask that?
Well, if we had laws that said all people are human beings and treated equally, I wouldn't have to ask at all. Yeah. Matt, do you have any thoughts about scary legislation?
Not really. No.
You sound like a typical teenager.
Yes.
I don't care about the government.
Let me live, let me skate.
Yeah, let me go, you know, hang out on my longboard. I don't want to have to worry about government things.
And that's the way it should be.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the way it should be.
Oh, well, I don't know. I think every student should know about the government. Come on.
No, but they shouldn't have to worry about something.
Personally, yes,
They
personally.
shouldn't have to worry about it before they walk out their door, I guess is what I think. You're right. Education is important. I get it.
As soon as they're 18, then they have to worry about it, but not.
There's some laws being put out trying to make it illegal for kids to access transition treatment before they're age 18. That's a scary one too. Matt wouldn't have made it to 18.
Had I not been able to medically transition when I was younger, I know for a fact I would not be here. That saved my life, and medically transitioning, like, it's so important to let kids transition in whatever way they need.
Do you mind talking about how that benefited you to transition that age? If it's too personal, that's fine, but that's something many of us don't know much about.
I mean, when I was younger, I had a lot of body dysphoria, and dysphoria is the disconnect between your body and your gender, and like and it's, you know, a bad thing. And it got so bad that I was, you know, really, really, really suicidal. And then I started medically transitioning, and I had top surgery, and I was like, oh, now I like myself, now I'm okay. And like, I think if I had I not been able to medically transition, I don't know what would have happened to me. And I'm very grateful to be able to, that I was able to.
Yeah.
As am I, because I work for Hennepin County, we have excellent health insurance. But for a lot of families, that would not have been an option. Um,
You can go.
just so you understand, when before kids are allowed to like completely transition, have surgery, things like that, even start on hormones, we do something called puberty blockers. And that's most often with a drug called Luperon. And what that does is it just stops puberty. And you're supposed to take those 2 years or however long you are on puberty blockers to dress in the gender that you want to be in, to live in that gender, and then be assessed psychologically and physically to ensure that this is actually the right choice for you, right? And it's gives everybody time, and it's completely reversible. If somebody decides that they don't want to transition, we just take them off puberty blockers and they go away. So one of the problems right now is that Matthew took that once a month for 2 or 3 years. And for us, it was $50 a month. But for a lot of people I know, it's between $1,000 and $4,000 a month.
It's expensive.
Mhm.
$50 is already a lot.
So there's insurance inequities, or just
Yes.
healthcare inequities. Yeah.
So is that is that legislated that you have to be on puberty blockers for 2 years, or is it just medically the
It is
norm?
part of the standard of care for transgender health services.
At least for minors, it is.
Yes. Yeah, you wouldn't be stopping puberty for an adult who's transitioning.
Yeah.
Right.
And is there benefits to transitioning when you're younger before you've gone through puberty?
Absolutely. One, first, if you are a person who is assigned female at birth, if you go on puberty blockers, you most likely won't develop breasts. Like you will if you go off of them and don't start on another type of hormone. It made me taller. It made me so much more taller. I was not supposed to be this tall. I'm 5'11". I was like 5'7" or shorter, because it keeps something open in your bones. I can't remember what it is. And so it made me taller. It makes transition a lot easier because it keeps your body more gender neutral, I guess would be the best way to say it. And then you can go on hormones and get the body you need.
I think also I know a lot of adults who had to transition after they were 18 because it just wasn't an option. They're my age, right? So they're transitioning now. But Matthew's ability to be fully transitioned now means that he's turning 18 in September and he's going to graduate and move out. He doesn't have to go to college and then start transitioning, right? It's over. He goes to college. He's who he is. He doesn't have to deal with that anymore. And it just shortens the trauma.
It also prevents I would have maybe needed facial surgery to masculinize my face or other types of surgery that I could have needed had I not been on it, but it kept my face pretty gender neutral without like those feminizing effects. And I was able to transition. My transition was a lot easier than it could have been.
Because I know that there's a movement of people who say, well, nobody should, you're forcing it on youth, or they should, you should wait until they're old enough to be an adult to make those decisions. But it does seem counterintuitive.
The puberty blockers make it so when they are ready and they are old enough to make those decisions, they can. It makes it easier to make it, I guess.
How long can you stay on puberty blockers for?
Apparently you can stay on them for quite a while. However, like Matthew mentioned, there can be some bone density issues. So it's not something you'd want to be on forever. I can't imagine they'd want somebody on it for more than 4 years, but you could go that long.
Yeah.
It's also, helpful for the family. Like it also gives them time to like have the family sort of get used to this idea.
it gives you time to decide on what you need on your transition.
Mhm.
You don't need to do everything right away.
Yeah.
If we can change gears a little bit, both Matt and Helene, I guess, relying on what you have experienced, to me, it sounds like the LGBTQ community is facing a lot of the same type of discriminations as people of color are. Now, I won't speak for Wright County, but our society as a whole now seems to be leaning towards accepting people of color more readily than accepting of LGBTQ people. Any thoughts on why that might be? Why are people more reluctant to accept somebody that is LGBTQ versus somebody that, for example, is Black?
I think part of it is that I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I know in my head what I'm trying to say, but I don't know how to get it out.
We do know that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I think transgender hate is strongly based in misogyny. And you can expand your worldview to accept people of color without changing your hatred towards women, but you can't expand. It doesn't work the other way. And ensuring that genders stay binary helps ensure men sort of stay on top, cisgender men stay on top. And there's a reason why, the group with the largest murder rate in the country every year is transgender women, Black women, because they're both, right? So, yeah, I don't know that I have much more to say about that.
I think there are parallels to be compared to both types of discrimination, but they are still very different types of discrimination. And I, within being a person of color, you can look at that person and go, I don't like that person. I can see exactly what they look like and dislike them based on their appearance. But with queer people, it is possible to be a little bit more covert and, dress straight and, and not, and, kind of hide a little bit. Well, if you're a person of color, you can't.
But the intense hatred is it's from fear. It's just fear. What am I going to lose? Not what I'm going to gain from accepting people from other lives than mine.
Well, and it's about power too.
Yeah, power too, but I think a lot of it is fear.
Fear of losing your power, I would say, yeah.
Yes.
I think a lot of that emotion comes out of fear, but I think there's a differentiation that has to be recognized when it comes to the level of hatred. People, so it depends on who you're talking about. Like, there's a lot of people in Wright County who have a lot of fear right now of losing what they have, and they've got good things in their life. They've got a house and family, but their jobs, they haven't had a good salary raise in a long time, and they're really starting to see their middle class income lifestyles slip. And there's this fear of losing that. So there's those folks, and they almost have this backlash of anger at others and want to cast out the blame to other people. And then you have the folks who are just pure power mongers. And I think we have to differentiate between them.
Anyone else have any questions?
I think you're muted, Sue.
Thank you. I was. I don't have a question, but Matthew, I really appreciate you and your mom coming on tonight. Roger and I have, well, we call her our honorary grandchild. She really isn't, but she is. I mean, not through birth, but anyway, long story. Maddie started transition 2 years ago. And we don't see her very often. We communicate, and when we do, like she was up this summer, and it's hard with the other little kids around to have a chance to really talk with her and to understand some of the things that she's gone through. And so this has really helped me tonight to make that connection with Maddie. I'm not sure how yet, but thank you. Thank you for that.
I'm glad that you-
Apologize, I came in late, but I had another meeting I needed to check on.
You
We're
missed a
glad you
good
made it
one
for part of the
here.
time.
Missed a good one.
Yeah. We've been talking about it. I have I have some friends that are going through it and so. Glad to have
Well, I
you both
just
here.
wanna say thank you to both of you for coming and sharing your story. I wish we had a little larger group. But like Sue said, we have the video that the recording we can put out for people to watch. I think this is like, well, I think it depends on which generation you're talking about. And Matthew, you can tell me if you think this is true or not. It seems like in younger generations, people are more able to discuss LGBTQ issues and transgender issues and just, they're more accepting of people being who they are. And you start to reach sort of these magical ages of, you get to the older ages and there's just that strong gender norming that people just don't seem to be able to get past. And so having conversations with people where we normalize the idea that gender is more fluid than we think it is so important. But thoughts on that, Matthew, about the generational divide?
I don't know if I have any thoughts on it. I think it is what it is, and there's not much we can do about it.
I think
Do
after
you want
you
to
get
talk
be
about like your
60
grandpa?
Yeah, but I think after you get to be 60, you're a little more accepting too, because it doesn't really matter.
Yes. Mhm.
I mean, you can accept better.
Matt, do you want to talk about your grandpa and your other older relatives? How was that?
I mean, I think with Grandpa, there was a little of a weird transition period for him to get used to it. But I don't know. I haven't really had a problem with my relatives, at least not that I remember. I know my mom did. There was some stuff that happened that when I was younger that I didn't really know about. But for the most part, everyone in my family is pretty accepting, or at least if they're not, they don't say it.
Yeah, I think your grandpa was very accepting from the beginning, even though it was awkward for him. And everybody else is fine now. It just takes some time sometimes. And sometimes you lose family members. We definitely lost some family members. We definitely lost some friends. I wanted to plug real quickly the next open comment meeting for the Buffalo Hanover Montrose School Board. I know that those opposed to the gender affirming policy, not that they can change it because it's the law and it's the settlement requirement. They have continued to go, and that's starting to cause some trauma for the LGBTQ kids in the schools because they're hearing all these things these adults are saying about them. And so there's been a call put out for 7 p.m. on Monday, the 27th to go to that meeting to have as many affirming people there as possible. So if you're available, that would be wonderful.
Where is that held then?
It's in Discovery Elementary.
Discovery Elementary.
It's right across from the police station.
Oh, yay.
Well, I mean, it just is. There isn't any like hidden message there. It just is.
Helene, if you could maybe write up a little something. We put out a Thursday blast of just information and meetings and things that are coming up. And if you could maybe give a little describer and send it to me, And I
Sure.
can put it out in our newsletter for people to be aware of and hopefully attend.
Yep, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about your art, Helene?
Sure. If you want to go to Iowa, I know at Morningside University, I have a show up called No Rest for the Women. It's me and Claire Lockhart, and we've done a joint show about imposed gender roles, basically women doing housework in various ways. And then opening on the 20th, I'm not entirely sure. We install on the 20th, so it opens that week at Inver Hills Community College, Gallery 120. I have what's called COVID Stories coming out, and that is a solo show that I'm very proud of. And this is all brand new work that nobody's seen before, so that's very cool. But yeah, if you go to the Monticello Community Center and go towards the back, you'll see a giant outdoor kind of mural type thing. That was mine.
That's really cool. You did that mural?
Yes, the new one. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually
Yeah,
printed
I live
by-
in I live here in Monticello, or I live in Monticello.
Beautiful.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Has Matthew's transition impacted your art, Helene?
I imagine it did. I mean, there were some years where I was just painting to get stuff out, but there was a lot going on. I think more, it wasn't so much his transition. It was trying to help a child who was depressed, and being afraid that I was going to lose my child, and all the stress that put on us as a family as a whole. That impacted my art. It wasn't because he was trans or not trans, but I've definitely learned a lot about my own sort of imposed gender roles. And I have sort of my kids will always say that when Matthew transitioned, then suddenly it was okay for him to be rude and impolite at the dinner table, while the girls, that was not okay. And they were right. And so I learned that I treat genders differently too. And so that was sort of like shown to me through my kids over and over whenever that would happen. So yeah, I've learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot. Yeah. But I don't know that I try to keep transgender issues out of my art, because Matthew's an artist in his own right, and he may someday want to tell his own stories, and they're not my stories to tell. So.
And Matthew, you're an artist. What's your art focused on?
I've been doing a lot of painting lately. I have a table I've been working on, like a picnic table I've been working on outside my art. I did like a weird fish earlier this summer. I want to be a tattoo artist and piercer. That's my dream.
Oh, fun. Do you have a lot of tattoos?
I have one single tattoo that I'm getting covered up sometime this month or next, the minute I turn 18. It's a bad tattoo I did when I was like 12. I don't even know.
He hasn't been allowed to have tattoos yet, but he turns 18 this month. So.
I plan to be fully covered up.
Well, Matthew, as a senior, you've already been planning for next year. I'm guessing you're moving in an artistic direction
Yeah.
after graduation.
Yeah, I want to go to an art college, most likely a 2-year degree, maybe a 4-year degree, but 2 years is probably what I'm going to go towards. And then I'll get an apprenticeship for tattoo art and body piercing. And then hopefully I'll become a professional body piercer and tattooist.
Awesome.
Fun.
Well, we probably need to wrap this up. It's getting close to our ending time. Anybody have any other comments that you want to make to Matthew and Helen, and just general comments at all? Go for it.
General comment is pouring outside. Wow. I can hear it.
We'll
really
take the
coming
rain.
down.
We'll take the rain.
Oh, definitely. Anyway.
I'd like to thank you for sharing that. Amazing.
Yeah, I agree. That was really, really inspiring.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
hope
very
you continue to get out your message and to talk to people, because situations like this, opportunities like this, I think are very enlightening, and they really help us old people understand things. And the more you can talk, as difficult as it must be, will make a difference. So thank you both for coming tonight and for sharing your story and being so willing to answer our questions and help us understand. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was an honor to be able to do this.
Thank you.
I
And you're
have
welcome to come to our meetings anytime.
Yes, got you on my mailing list now.
It's longer and longer.
Now.
Just so everybody knows, it looks like in October, our next monthly meeting on October 11th, unless things fall apart COVID-wide, will be held at the Monticello VFW. The back room is available. Tiffany, our waitress, is still working there. She would be our waitress. Same kind of setup that we've had before. I understand if people aren't comfortable, but we thought, well, we had a picnic in July and maybe we would try this one. So we're not going back to in-person meetings all the time, but we thought we would try it in October. And I believe that is, I just lost, it's Columbus Day, but Lanny is going to be doing a presentation on Columbus Day and how that has changed and what we need to learn and to know about it. So I will send out that information, but we're going to try it in person. So hope you can all be there. Anything
Comes
else?
from the book, The Lies My Teacher Told Me, or whatever, that we did the study about Columbus. Yeah.
Yeah, some good information. So thank you everybody for tonight, for your questions, your thoughts, your comments, and for being here. We appreciate it and stay. Oh yeah, you don't have to leave and go outside, so you won't be getting wet. Oh, good. All right, we're okay.
We have to do the garbage joke, so yeah, we do.
I apologize
you,
for missing
everybody.
part of it, but I want to hear about the redistricting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.